Jonathan, I think we can get started, and I'm sure we'll end up having some people dropping in as we go along. But why don't you take us away?
Super. All right. Thanks, John. Well, first of all, hello everybody, and welcome to today's conversation about building back better. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have an audience that represents different parts of golf, but also across so many different countries and time zones. So from the UK to Europe to the Middle East, and also further afield. So some people up very early in the morning, and some people up late at night, and some people right on the cusp of that in Australia, New Zealand, China, and the United States. So thank you for joining us, and we hope we're going to have a great conversation today. We've come together from all of those different places with a common interest in exploring how sustainability can help golf's COVID-19 recovery, a green recovery, as it is often referred to, and you'll no doubt have read. But we'd also like to look at how this lens of sustainability and the practical issues, the practical action areas that make it up, are not just relevant to supporting recovery, but are also actually becoming essential to the long-term success of the sport of golf around the world. And we are seeing ever more evidence of the related threats to golf, from regulation to the cost and availability of natural resources to changing climate and weather patterns, as well as evidence of many new opportunities that this movement in sustainability is bringing, from the chance to drive down new efficiencies and cost savings, to positioning your club or your tournament or just the sport as a whole as a much more popular pastime and a more modern pastime. Sustainability can be a very modernizing force, and as well as new partnerships that we're seeing, again, locally, nationally, internationally, people putting together to find win-wins for golf and their businesses, as well as the sort of common good. And I think it is important timing, because even though COVID is the big topic and obviously the big concern and uncertainty, there is still that recognized need to look after the environment, to protect biodiversity, to conserve water and energy, to reduce pollution and waste, to minimize emissions. These are all underlying strands and drivers, which of course aren't going to go away. In fact, they're only going to get stronger. And again, on the plus side, all of those sort of social and environmental needs that we have nowadays, golf is fantastically well placed to contribute to. So thank you for being here. And if we just move on, John, we can see that, and again, that John and I are delighted to be joined by for the conversation today by a fantastic panel of guests who also themselves represent different parts of golf and have really quite different angles on the subject. So we're going to try and do quite a lot, which is to cover everything from the leadership angle right down to the grassroots facility and golf course maintenance angle, and then with Jed's view, how we can package this up and help use it to golf's benefit in marketing and communications. Okay, and we have a lot to pack in. We're going to try and bundle that together with some insights, with guest interviews, with some live polls, with an open Q&A, and also a little bit of GEO perspective on maybe what comes next in golf and sustainability towards the end. And I think, John, you're going to say a little bit about how the audience can get involved.
Yeah, this is very much in a conversation, and very much our goal with this is to see this an interactive webinar as well. Just as an FYI, I think we've all had to learn new technologies and new ways to connect and interact over the last few months. It's certainly forced me to move forward in that regard for sure. So this webinar, we're really pleased to have literally international representation on it. And on the right-hand side of your screen over there, you'll see a chat panel. That's where you can submit questions or comments directly to myself. And as we go through the webinar, we'll take the opportunity to review on some of those. And indeed, some of those questions and comments will, I suppose, inform future webinars, future interaction that we do with the industry, and lead to a much wider conversation, which is our goal in this whole process. Also on the right-hand side, as we go through, We'll be popping up occasionally from time to time some polls, some opportunities for you guys to share your real-time experiences and your own perspectives of our audience here with us. So those will be an opportunity for you to share your perspective as well, and we'll see what comes from that. With all that in mind, and as Jonathan said, we've got a lot to get stuck into, so let's move straight into the first key topic that we're going to cover here, which is very much a bird's eye view. We want to start off by just taking a more strategic perspective on sustainability in the industry and what matters most to it. Before we go to our first interview with one of our friends and guests, then we're going to also just take a moment to reflect on our recent industry insight poll. Many of you, if not most of you on this webinar, will have contributed to it. You'll have seen it circulated online, and it was just an opportunity for us to get a snapshot, a perspective of how the industry was reacting at this time. And within that, we were really pleased to have cross-section of responses from 20 different countries, 5 continents, all sorts of shapes and sizes of facilities, from the largest resorts right to the smallest public and municipal facilities. So it's given us a really rounded perspective from the facility side, but also from individuals who fulfill a variety of different roles in the industry too. The first insight, which I'll share with you right now, is not perhaps a surprising one, but it's certainly a powerful one. As you can see on your screens there, 96% of those who responded ranked sustainability as either very important or important. And to be specific, 3/4 of them did say it was very important to them at this time. Now that's no major surprise, but I think what it really focuses the attention on is saying that at this stage, when businesses and clubs and facilities are focusing on what they need to be doing most to react to the challenges we've faced in this year, they're turning to sustainability. Within that, and we asked people to explore a little bit more of the details of what it actually meant to them, what sustainability meant for them. They really focused a lot around the long-term efficiencies, the savings that can be made, the operational efficiencies, and indeed the benefits that can be made to products and services and experiences that come within the golf industry. And all of that can be bundled under one big word: resilience. More resilient for the future, because these kinds of challenges have only been coming around more often, and there's a potential that they're more likely to come up time and time again. So what do you think? What do you believe on this? In a second, I'm going to share our first of our polls, which is just the opportunity for you to respond to on the right-hand side of the screen there. When we bring that up, there you can see, I think it's just popped up right now, you will have 3 options. And the question really is just to say which of those statements there best describes your strategic outlook for sustainability. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds while you click your buttons, but the options are really, is it an already an urgent priority for the game of golf? Is it increasingly going to influence golf success, or is it not really an immediate priority? There's nothing scientific about that poll, but I can already see that we've got a balanced perspective with a slight slant towards it being a more pressing priority at this time. And I think this is where we want to take the conversation next, is speaking to one of the industry's leaders in this subject and some strategic leadership in that regard. With that in mind, Jonathan, I'll hand over to you, who will introduce our first of our guests.
Thanks, John. So it's interesting seeing that poll, because it certainly feels like there is an acceleration at the minute in terms of how sustainability is perceived and how it is being prioritised across the golf sector. So to explore that further, we wanted to get the perspective of an industry leader, an association leader. And we've spoken to Euron Stevens, who's Chief Executive of the Dutch Golf Federation. Now, for many years, Euron has been a long-time advocate and supporter and investor in sustainability in the sport in the Netherlands. And unfortunately, as our first guest, Euron couldn't make today's session live as a result of COVID, but we did catch up with him a couple of days ago, and he pre-recorded these insights for you. Good morning, Euron. It's nice to see you again, and thanks a lot for taking the time out to be part of this Building Back Better Sustainable Golf webinar, the first of a number of conversations that we're looking to have around how sustainability can help strengthen golf in the future. And we've been hearing, Euron, from our recent international opinion poll that sustainability is becoming really rapidly emerging as a top priority for golf. Is that how you see things at the Dutch Golf Federation and in the Netherlands?
Well, not since recent years. I think we've been here for a long time. I think it started like 25 years ago. So, but yes, I can see that this topic is becoming more and more important, and not only in sports, not only in golf, but almost to say logically, also in golf.
Mm-hmm. And how does it fit for you? In terms of your overall Dutch Golf Federation strategy, is it up there alongside participation and the popularity of the sport, those sorts of things?
Well, yes, like I just mentioned, I think like 25 years ago, it started with a committee greenkeeping in the Dutch Golf Federation who addressed this subject and had their project, which you also know very well, Committed to Green. It was really focused on what I call nature and environmental stuff, like the birds, the bees, and the flowers, to show the rest of, not the world, but the Netherlands, that golf is a environmental friendly sport instead of what a lot of people thought, a golf that was seen as a polluter. Mm-hmm. And I would say that like 10 years ago, there was GEO, a international certified a project or a recognized body which provides a structure, a framework for us to work with a lot of success. We already have more than 100 golf clubs into GEO. I would say where we started like 20 years ago, it was really focused on the environmental stuff, nature, and 10 years ago we also started with the energy transition, waste as a subject, more cost driven, I would say. Mm-hmm. And then like 5-6 years ago, we were confronted with with the subject called pesticides. In our country, it's called the Green Deal, which also is there in the European Committee. But we've seen this word like 6 years ago, and that was a real fast tracker, so to say, in attention for golf clubs to embrace this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And how has that landed with the clubs? I mean, I know, from our experience of working with you, that you've had really quite a tight and clear strategy on how to take sustainability out to the industry. And a big strand of that has been to engage the clubs to sort of raise their awareness and understanding of what being a sustainable business is. How have the clubs reacted to that? How have you felt that part of the plan go ahead?
Well, I would say the clubs have adapted really well, because this is not a subject you can do easily or do it in a week and then you're finished. It's a continuous process, and we invested a lot of time and money in this subject. I would say like 500,000 euros a year, and that already for years, and that makes we really like Niels and together with Niels Koert in our federation, two really experienced and very well educated persons who can really help the golf clubs to adapt to the new reality. And what you see now is that golf clubs that have adapted this like 10 years ago, they're really making progress on quality in their golf courses as well. So what is said that sustainable greenkeeping makes greenkeeping more difficult. I would say that's true for the first 3 to 5 years, maybe a bit longer, but after that it makes it easier. Mm-hmm. and quality can even become better. I'm coincidentally a member of our sustainable committee at my golf club, and I've seen that transition from using loads of water, loads of pesticides to maintain the golf course, to using almost no water and no pesticides, and quality has gone up, but not without problems.
Yeah.
So I must admit that, and that is also maybe the most important thing to address. You can't do this with experiencing what you should do, and you will see problems in greenkeeping, but if you take the time for it, it will help you to become better.
Yeah. So do you think that those clubs
and cheaper?
Yeah. I was going to ask, because if those clubs if they're achieving high quality, but with, in spite of the Green Deal and some of those other regulatory pressures and the cost of natural resources and things, then I guess in a way they're more resilient businesses. They're more sort of future-proofed. But
yeah, definitely.
But there's a couple of other things. When people talk about sustainability, they often talk about quality, and they often talk about efficiency and also popularity of businesses, being more popular brands. So on the efficiency side, are you seeing that as well, that clubs are maybe a bit sort of leaner?
I can't tell you exact in numbers, but I would suspect yes. And I can say for my own golf club, yes, it's become more efficient, clearly. Less mowing, less money to buy pesticides, things like that. We're a better partner for government to talk with. So I would say the only downside is the first years you have to go through because you can't do it overnight.
Yeah.
It's a process where you have to, and that makes it difficult for some committees or boards to adapt because you have to inform your members or greenfield players what you're doing. And I would say this sustainability is so high in priorities in society as where we live, that it's not if you should do it, it's more when do you start with it, and how do you cope with the, so to say, negative sides in the beginning. But at the end, you only have positive sides.
Yeah, I think that's been really impressive, actually. Just again, sort of observing a bit from the outside on what you've done over the years, is you've gone out with quite strong and compelling messages to the clubs, and then you've just kind of stuck at it. You've kept telling and reassuring and supporting the clubs that these things are important, and there's a way that the clubs can get organized to generate those results. One of the things that I always like seeing coming out of the Netherlands are, for example, when the local town mayor visits the golf club to give the golf club recognition, or an NGO starts talking positively. And I also know at Olympic level, you've had positive feedback. So you seem to be getting some traction with the outside world paying attention. Is that fair? Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we were seen as maybe as a sport, but not as an environmental friendly sport like 20 years ago. And now we're seen as a sport, which is not a direct result from sustainability, but we're seen as a sport. But for almost every sport, when they have questions about sustainability, they call the Netherlands Golf Federation, and that is a huge effort, I would say. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, I mean that's sort of switching it round so that golf's a leader.
Well, yes, I would. Niels, for example, is a member of a governmental committee that needs to make a strategy or have an opinion about the future sustainability issues in sports. Who could have thought that 20 years ago that golf would be part of it?
Yeah. And final thoughts, Euron. I mean, there's a lot of golf associations out there around the world, and They'll be either feeling pressures or maybe not seeing some of the new opportunities that sustainability presents to the sport as a sort of modernizing type influence. Any sort of guidance, any recommendations for association leaders? Anything you'd suggest that?
Yeah, well, I would say, like I just said, I don't think it's a question if you got to do this, but more when. And when you see the opportunity in your country, because I also think that it's different around the world. I mean, like the Netherlands is definitely not the same as Spain, which is also in Europe. So I'm not here to tell everybody what to do, but I would say in your own context, start with it. And if you start with it, do it well and do it with leadership, because that will be the only way to get it into the veins of the sport, which is important. But I don't think there is a recipe which you can copy. But if you think it will be there without doing anything, I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for that, Euron, and thanks for joining us today. We're tight for time, otherwise there's a lot more we would love to pick your brains about. Yeah, thank you for joining us, Euron, and Niels will pick up with the Q&A later in the webinar. Thanks.
Very good. Then you've got the real experts. That's better.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.
All the best. Thanks.
Excellent insights there from a real industry and leader in the industry there for us. And fantastically, Euron's given us a bit of a perspective in terms of his own club as well as from a federation perspective. Jonathan, any quick thoughts off the back of that?
I just loved his phrase that leadership is vital to get it into the veins of the sport. I think that was, I think that says it all.
I think that was fantastic, wasn't it? And in that vein of getting it into the veins of the sport, I think we all know that so much of this is delivered at facility level, at the grassroots. And I think that leads us into what's going to be our next key talking point on this webinar, is essentially the facility perspective, if you will. And again, before we dip into our experts, and we've got two experts who do this day in, day out at their own golf courses and their own golf clubs, I just wanted to share a second insight that came out of our recent opinion poll. Now, there's some stats behind this, but the one that's really fascinating for us is that reacting to the recent challenges, the challenges of 2020 that I think we all know too well, clubs have placed a greater emphasis on sustainable practices. And within that, we've seen things such as course naturalization being accelerated, bulk purchasing, energy and water efficiency. Those topics have come to the fore. But what I think has been really fascinating for us in exploring what clubs see as having been dealt with now and what they're going to do in the future is that those things are not short-term out of necessity. They are long-term strategic choices that they've made. They intend to carry these practices forward into the future, as well as having used the pandemic, the COVID crisis, as a reason to accelerate them at this time. It's really emphasizing the value of sustainability and cost savings, operational efficiencies, and I suppose in improving products and the experience that our consumers get as well. So that's a really fascinating insight for us, is that these things are not just short-term actions that are going to be as a result of a pandemic. They also provide the longer-term direction that golf facilities want to head. Jonathan, we have two guests to share experiences with us. Why don't you introduce them?
Yeah, thank you, John. So yeah, two very experienced guests here who have been at the forefront of sustainable golf facility operations for many years. They're both key decision makers in the Burr Golf and Leisure Group in the UK, who own and operate 10 facilities of different types across England. So Guy, I'd like to start with you, if I may. Why have you put such an emphasis on sustainable management at Burr Hill? You know, the work that you've done on water, energy efficiency, enhancing the natural value of the landscapes, the golfing landscapes, reaching out into the community as much as you do on often on environmental projects. What's the reason behind all of that?
Jonathan, thank you for the opportunity to come on this webinar, and yeah, the files behind me are all my research into this. No, I'm working from one of the golf clubs today. In fact, I've just come from a planning meeting on an irrigation and reservoir system. But so yeah, we try and live and breathe it here. I think, you know, in answer to your question, it's driven, you know, we've got a shareholder. We're fortunate we work for a company with 10 golf sites in the UK. We're actually family owned, and that the shareholders have a very a long-term view to the horizon, and they have, you know, a great concern about where we're heading, and you know, sustainability for them is a key part for the future success of this business. I think it's also now is being driven more and more by, you know, our customer. There is an expectation coming in, and there's also that expectation from our employees of how we behave and how we take these issues seriously, what we do in our day-to-day lives at work, and how we demonstrate that. So, you know, kind of, you know, and there's sort of some personal issues here that, you know, we kind of take them home with us as well, making some of those decisions at home with our families as well. So it's kind of it kind of travels right the way through, but it's all about, we're concerned about the future. And we see that. I mean, Rob will, you know, who will come on in a moment. You know, we see that after 3 very dry summers in the UK. You know, everyone thinks of the UK always raining. Well, it hasn't been. It rains at the wrong time. So, you know, we are seeing some real damage done by that in some of our areas, and we have to become better at managing.
Yeah.
There's also you know, there's a cost, there's a profitability piece here. But actually dealing with these issues, we can actually be more successful, we feel, for the future, which is good for the employees and our shareholder. There's an ethical element which is right through here, behaving correctly, and that's good for working communities, for, you know, how we place golf, how we market golf in the local community, and how we attract future customers into the game who may have had an opinion about golf, you know, burnt from times before. But I think that's changing, that's evolving now. And also we seek, I mean, I'll be quite honest, we seek competitive advantage. You know, we want to be one step ahead of what other people are doing in the market, so that if we are going to be genuinely successful for our employees and our shareholder, we need to make these decisions now. So, you know, I think it's, you know, some of this is driven by the here and now, being profitable right now, but it's about the concern for what is happening, doing the right thing. And there's an expectation, shareholder, you know, customers and our employees.
Yeah. Just before I move on to Rob, Guy, so a couple of interesting things there. The customer side, first of all. So, because I know that you've used your sort of environmental and ethical and sort of, you know, social purpose, you know, you've taken that out. Do you really think, or do you have evidence that has been part of the success of your businesses, their popularity, and the number of golfers of different types and customers of different types that you've attracted? Do you think it really connects with people coming to your facilities?
It's like anything. I mean, it's a part of it. I mean, there's a whole myriad of different messages which count and matter. But it's one of those kind of, it's like anything in success. It's made up of many different ingredients. Not necessarily, you can't rely on one single thing. It's one of the strands that comes through. But I think, you know, going forward, we need to do a lot more with this. I mean, it's a journey, and in some cases, I'd say, you know, we're only just starting part of that journey, and it's a bit, you know, in some cases we're, you know, on our water management and our, I think we're much further ahead than many. In other areas, we need to apply more focus and concentration. And it's like anything. It's like, you plant a tree. Best time to plant a tree is today, isn't it? And that's making that change.
Yeah, and one other quick point for you, Guy, on the staff side. I mean, sometimes it feels a little bit like golf clubs or facilities might be reluctant to introduce something new to staff. Oh, here's another thing, another responsibility, another thing to think of. But you said that the staff have sort of responded well, and this seems to have landed well with them. How have you managed that? Yeah,
I mean, an example yesterday, we were delivering COVID-friendly food policy training, making sure we operate safely. It's an important part of our kitchens, and but at the same time, we also were delivering a message about which Colin, our chief exec, was delivering about sustainability for the future, and he did an hour's update. So we're using all sorts of opportunities to engage with our teams about the message. And I was talking to the teams who were at those meetings, and their feedback on that, and they're really positive about it. And it's and one of the things we ended the meeting with is about them making a difference, and what can they do back at home. Because you kind of think, our lives at home and work, they often kind of merge a little bit, and it's trying to get it both ways. So if it's on their agenda at home, they're also bringing it into work, and it's pushing it further up the agenda, making it relevant to everything we do, keeping it high. So it's not just, and I yesterday was talking about the noise of COVID in this environment at the moment. It's so sort of deafening. And it's about sort of keeping things in perspective and making sure sustainability remains on the agenda and doesn't get put back by other things.
Actually, just to the point that Guy, that you made there about putting COVID into perspective. So one thing that we have seen and heard is that in most countries, people are looking for or valuing more nature and green spaces and clean air. They need this. Where can I get outdoors? How can I make myself, healthier? The sort of human health and well-being side. So, I think Rob's trying to speak. So, is that how have you handled that? Because that would come with pressures and maybe new opportunities as well, Guy.
Absolutely. I mean, wow, what a great opportunity golf has right now. We're in a good space. And I think this is a space we should not be we should not be ashamed to exploit, in the sense of the one thing that COVID has brought to everyone's it's made them very much thankful of outdoor space. And I think the amount of golf members that we've seen join, we've seen a dramatic increase of 200% increase on our short courses, for example. People, non-family, dads coming, mums bringing their children out, and it's actually getting them into golf.
Manage the golf courses in the most
using that outdoor space. But it's been a really good opportunity, and I think the value of golf in the community is almost like it's been pressing a fast forward button. And we just need to make sure we maintain and hold on to those messages. But I think it's put the value of golf in the community. It's pushed it up the agenda greatly.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll come back to the course management side with the Q&A. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Rob back on. Guy, final point from you just before we sort of move on towards the Q&A. What would you say to other club and course managers? I mean, you're networking around the industry a lot. You visit a lot of golf clubs and things. What would you say to other club and course managers about making stronger moves in this direction? You hear the phrase integrating sustainability a bit, more deeply into your decisions. Have you any suggestions on the process of doing that?
Well, it starts with budgeting. I think it starts with the will that you're going into budgeting with different general managers and planning and making sure it's within the agenda. Because often if you don't plan for something and put some resource aside to do something, it's not going to change. It's always going to be next year or the year after, and it never happens. So it's kind of saying, no, we're going to do it, and not necessarily often, we've got to play the long-term, medium to long-term game, and you can't necessarily expect it back immediately. So it's that preparedness that we've invested in heavily in the last half decade in irrigation and our water management systems, and we're seeing the results of that come through now.
Right.
And that will only the payback on that will only simply accelerate over time. But those are decisions which were made a long time ago. Those commitments, and if that so it's trying to get across to the management teams that it's be prepared to plant it now and be patient. Yeah. Don't expect it immediately back. And we've also therefore, as the executive team, got to be patient with them on the return on that. So by allowing them space to do this, and sometimes that can be a tricky philosophy with general managers and teams, and say, because they haven't necessarily done something before, and saying no, you can do it, please do it, giving them reminding them got the green light to do something like that and take initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point, actually, putting the focus on the cost side of this, the cost savings side, and also what people describe as wise investments. But sitting down and having a culture where a team can come together and say, what can we save now, and what should we start to invest now?
Yeah.
And using and looking at water, energy, and materials, particularly as cost centers, and making sure that those two sides of it are being thought about as a team, because it's in everybody's interest that in the success of the facility is affected by it. Thank you, Guy. Thanks so much, and I'm sure we'll have some questions in the Q&A, and hopefully Rob will be back. He's maybe off to celebrate being a greenkeeper a little bit early. All right, John, back to you.
As you say, Jonathan, I think the volume of social media content and tweets about Rob and his role as a course manager has maybe crashed the internet there. So what I'll do is I'll try to bring Rob in on some of the Q&As towards the end. But I do want to move on to essentially the next segment of it, where we want to take a slightly different perspective on sustainability in golf and what matters at this time. And that's really a perspective a little bit more, I suppose, relevant to us all nowadays in terms of the marketing perspective. It's really hardly a week goes past without us having seen some kind of report from the industry in terms of the importance of sustainability and consumer behavior nowadays, and in terms of consumer attitudes changing and how social and environmental responsibility are influencing people's choices in modern society. So I suppose the question we're seeking to address at this time is how ethical is golf? How is it perceived? And can it be perceived as a positive part of our society, and avoid some of those maybe old cliches about the game and how it's perceived then? With that in mind, I'm going to bring us on to our next insight, which came from our international opinion poll. And it's not it's one that's come up quite often in the past, but really a resounding statement from internationally around the world in the golf industry. That is the requirement for us to be better at communicating, and a requirement for us to be better at connecting with our wider communities. This really provides, I suppose, off the back of the pandemic and in some countries lockdown scenarios, we maybe experienced a scenario where golf wasn't available for some time, or perhaps even where golf courses became the only green space that certain people in urban environments had access to. So it's a real opportunity that many have grasped and have seen the opportunity to reach out to their communities. But in turn, that also means that we have an increased responsibility upon us to connect, and even a slight dependency on our own local communities, our local suppliers, being able to react to our needs as businesses, and the partnerships that we have in our communities to those that make decisions about that influence us and affect us, or shared interest groups, those with a connection to the landscape. So with that comes the opportunity. It also comes a challenge to us. And with that in mind, I suppose I just want to share our third poll. I'll skip back to the second one at some point, but our next poll in this regard talks about the perception of the game of golf. And you can see there, it's brought up on the side of the screen. So really, we're just looking to hear your perspective in terms of which of these statements best describes the importance of marketing golf as being sustainable at this time. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see I suppose there's three options there. Golf's image is fine. Do we need to prioritize sustainability at all at this time? It's a bonus to do, but it's maybe perhaps not directly relevant to club success. Or is it a subject that can directly benefit a club's business? Jonathan, I'm going to hand back to you to introduce our third interview, and we'll watch those poll responses coming in as well.
Super, thanks. Well, it looks like the poll is suggesting that golf's image isn't fine at the moment, or maybe not as good as it could be. So there is room for improvement here. So to help us unpick some of these image and reputation aspects of sustainability, Jed Moore from Performance 54. Jed, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for bringing some of your experience. I know that you've been marketing and promoting golf, working with associations, developers, events, players, and facilities, so touching all parts of the game and promoting all parts of the game. Jed, first of all, do you think that sustainability, or are you seeing sustainability as a bigger part of marketing in business and sport in general?
Thanks, Jonathan. I think the short answer is yes, very much so in the space that we operate in, very focused in the golf sector. And again, across all walks of vested stakeholders in the industry. I think the importance is snowballing. I think the appreciation and recognition amongst brands, amongst destinations, governments, certainly the guardians of the game recognise the importance of that. And I think the events that we're experiencing through 2020 are pointing towards the necessity to have that socially conscious leadership and again, business practice that lends itself to the greater good. I think the sports industry is suffering from the ability to draw the direct correlation between the commercial benefits. Guy was talking to the competitive advantage and the openness to recognise that actually that's how sports rights holders and teams need to adopt that approach. It's being dictated by the commercial end at the moment, the funders of the sport, the brands that invest, that they're mandating that their investments in sponsorship and the like are accompanied with deeper core values. So sports rights holders are being forced to adopt a better stance, a more proactive stance, if you will, that's beyond paying lip service to the subject matter. And I think with that's dictating the cultural shift. It's allowing rights holders, the executives, to actually understand that embracing it at a central level. So it's not just there at the budgeting end, as Guy pointed out, but the will and the desire and the demand is there centrally. So you have that internal champion to facilitate the commercial requirements of partners. I'll be interested to see the devastation that COVID's had on live events and sports valuations and their performance. Serie A have just gone through a process, I believe, where they're about to try and offload their commercial rights to try and sustain their long-term commercial viability. And I think that the hope is that the socially conscious side and the requirements actually comes to the fore and maintain their position. One other bit that I think that we're very guilty of forgetting is the importance of innovation in sustainability. I think sometimes it can be perceived, the stigma is it's a sort of a bit of a hindrance to what the ideal practice might be. And when you look at certain sports, Formula E is a prime example. Innovation in technology and links to sustainability are actually what's going to accelerate the movement. There's a couple of examples in stadium, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. They've just been given the highest recognition in sustainable leadership with how they're going about their water management solutions. But importantly, how that's connected to the community, because the high storm surges that they have, that they've invested in that. And again, Mercedes has been a key driver. The ocean race as well, with how they connect in with their boat so they can actually pick up samples as they race. The vessels become research centres. And I think that innovation, recently you're involved, Jonathan, the Sentosa Golf Club and the UN Sport and Climate Framework is bringing best practice that's founded on innovation to the fore. That's making the marketer's job easier because we've got a deeper story, a more authentic story to talk about. And for me, I think that's really dictating and shifting us towards a more progressive outlook to sustainability in marketing.
Mm-hmm. I think, Jed, there's a lot in what you said there, and certainly from our perspective, you're working in this area day in, day out, we can see all of that. So the government and corporate expectations, and so those influencers in golf, and they invest in golf and they regulate golf, that expectation and the hope for value add from golf and sustainability is there. But one of the things that, and I guess what we're all about, and probably most people on this webinar are interested in, is how can then golf step forward with its narrative, with its talk. So if Burr Hill is walking the walk, how can Burr Hill talk the talk to meet those other local or regional sponsors, local government and groups to sort of ignite those partnerships that might not be igniting at the minute because maybe those partners don't see golf as really representing all of this yet?
I think it's a big question, but I think that there's a lot of simple answers. I think golf is blessed with the ability, just given what it is, given its integration with nature and everything that comes for its position within local communities, its employment factors. There are so many different propositions to it that every little helps. So I think that, the question of how does a golf club go and position itself alongside sustainability, there will be degrees. There'll be some that are very progressive, and that's deep rooted in how they've been founded, how they've been funded, or who their owners are. But at the same instance, there are other easy ways, from the uses of plastic, from water management, irrigation systems that are invested in, to education of employees, to working with some of the big OEMs that are championing this space and making sure that the value comes back to the local community. I think it's easy to find a voice with sustainability practice. I think it's more accessible than ever. I think that the work that GEO Foundation has done has given us those signposts to be able to understand it. But my own journey with sustainability is that I've been in and around it for such a long time, but at quite a shallow level. And it wasn't until I was introduced to it with the guys on the webinar that, the likes of Ed Edwards in Saudi Arabia, of understanding the integrated link between social, economic and environmental, and how they all piece together. And it was a realization from my perspective that actually we were involved in key areas, investment in education for our team, but also support at grassroots level, from introducing the sport to schools, into curriculums, and again that introduction to ministers and the other establishments. So I think that there are signposts that are there that if you just take the time to look long and hard enough, you'll actually unpick a few opportunities that will allow you to realize that you're probably doing a bit more than you perhaps thought, but that there are some easy opportunities to actually embrace it and get involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point in general, and it's one that actually is often wrestled with. What can different parts of golf say now about its value to the environment and communities? Just inherently, there is, as you've highlighted, so much. And then what are the areas for improvement that you kind of need to go through? You need to have those plans and those commitments, and improving performance is an important part of sustainability. So what does that performance plan look like that then enables you to say even more and sort of elevate the strength of your communications from what's just inherently good about golf? I think that's an interesting area for the future. Help and very much, how do we help put capacity out into the industry to help greenkeepers, club managers, tournament organisers, general secretaries of associations understand some of the balancing act, because it's not all about golf improving performance. There is a huge amount that golf can celebrate already. Jed, I'm just going to leave it there because in terms of time, but we're going to come back to this in the Q&A, and I've certainly got one more question for you in the Q&A, but I'm keen to get there and hear what others think. Thank you. Thanks so much, Jed. Microphone, John, maybe?
Hopefully you can hear me now. There we go. Some excellent perspectives from the industry there and some of our guests. And a great opportunity, I suppose, to hear from some of our industry leaders in terms of what they're addressing right now. I've got a couple of questions, some really specific ones and some more broad as well that have come in from the audience. So maybe just to start us off, I might ask Niels from the Dutch Golf Federation. Jeroen, during his interview, referred to Niels on a couple of occasions, and he's essentially the manager responsible for sustainability and agronomy. So hopefully Niels will be able to join us in a moment just to answer the following question. And there we are, he's on the screen. Niels, thanks for joining us. And I suppose my question to you is what do you think is the single most important thing that you've seen or have achieved from your perspective at the Dutch Golf Federation when it comes to sustainability?
Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to elaborate a bit more on this in the Q&A. I think Jeroen already said a lot of things about our approach and the reasons why, etc. The major thing we achieved, and I mean it's not a single somebody who does it, but the culture changed. The culture changed in the whole industry, in the whole sector, basically over, well, Jeroen mentioned 20, 25 years, maybe even up to 30 years with the first initial efforts back then. And now it's the way to go, basically. So basically the culture changed. We all together achieved. And, if you look at the practices maybe 20 years ago, around that time versus some 10 years and right at this stage, 2020, it definitely changed things around. The approach to it, to take a more fundamental approach to things and not the quick fixes, so to say, in order to better secure quality. Because besides the cost savings, I think one of the major things which sustainability will give you is you're better able to secure your quality, whatever quality that is. But I think that's a major one. Mm-hmm. And yeah, no, I mean, for instance, among greenkeepers, what is really the thing now, I think, I'm not saying you can go without pesticides completely, but if you're kind of a major pesticide user, you're kind of viewed as a cheater. You're cheating with a lot of pesticide use. It's kind of the trick to use low input pesticide and to really get that craftsmanship back out there on the course and to really address the problems instead of grabbing to a bottle of a pesticide instantly.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, Niels, and just by pure chance this morning I was speaking to a course manager here in Scotland, and his priorities around reducing that reliance on the bottle, shall we say. And from that perspective, do you see, in your role, you obviously guide and support golf courses, you provide agronomy guidance. There's one question that's dropped in here that just sort of says, do you see a trend in terms of what they are prioritizing at this time?
In regards of greenkeeping and what the priority is, I'd say to grow the sustainable bends and fescues on the greens at least, to be less dependent on a lot of water, to be less dependent on pesticides, etc. And I'd say that's a major focus point for all the guys out there. They're really trying to achieve that level of sustainability in that way. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Niels. It's I think we can go into so many of these different topics in greater depth, and I think that's going to be our intention as we carry on these conversations. So thanks very much for taking the chance to answer that question.
Right.
I do have another question, Jonathan, which I'm going to just throw out to Rob. Hopefully we might be able to get him in on audio at this point. we're going to give it another go. Rob, can you hear us at all? I'm going to just see if you can hear us.
Yeah, fine.
You can hear us. Thank you for joining us, Rob. It may be, as I say, the volume of tweets that are mentioning you that's just slowing down the internet. The big question I have for you, Rob, I mean, this comes almost from one greenkeeper to another, having been in that role myself. What do you think is the most impactful sustainability project that you have done or are doing at your courses?
It's got to be our water management. We have obviously got 10 sites, and one of the main issues we had was that most of them were on mains water feeds. So we got tasked with trying to make sure that that's not the case. So I think it was 2011 when we had the hot summer, and then we went into a hose pipe ban, and then it never stopped raining once they put the hose pipe ban on for the, I think it was just the week of the Olympics that it was okay. But that year we were looking at cutting 7 of our golf courses might have had the chance of having no irrigation water at all, due to the restrictions from the water supply. So we've now got 5 out of the 10 all have their own holding lakes. We've got 2 in the process, plus an extension at one of the other courses. So that's really been one of our big areas that we've looked at, is managing the water situation.
And yeah, certainly that reflects on what we see in speaking, I suppose, internationally around the world in terms of that new emphasis, that priority on water management. I think there's another webinar in that topic as well, which we may have to pick your brains on. And specifically, would you say, there's a question coming here in the chat that talks a little bit about how you interact with your course or your fellow course maintenance staff, the greenkeepers. How do you go about interacting with them in terms of their helping them appreciate and indeed engage with sustainability?
You know, we do a lot of recycling. We also get them the guys involved in the projects that we do. For instance, building bird boxes when on frosty mornings and things like that. And we've built a bird hide that overlooks one of the lakes. We've done bug houses, hotels. You know, got them involved in those, building those out of old pallets that we use from turf and stuff like that, and putting a roof on them and getting the guys to bring stuff in and fill those up with the relevant materials. So yeah, just trying to make them think more around the sheds. One of the other issues we did, we changed all the for energy saving. We changed all the lights to motion sensors through the whole irrigation compound as well, and yeah, we saw a big saving on that. So when guys walk through the building now, obviously they come on as they go through. So no lights are left on, obviously, by doing that, which has been great.
Practical examples of what we can do in the industry and at our facilities and on our courses. So it's brilliant to explore these. I've said to you already on the message that I think what we'll do is we'll make a recorded separate webinar to complement this one, because I think we really want to pick your brains in terms of some of the things that you're practically doing. And we really appreciate you dropping in. Thank you for doing that, and thanks for taking the opportunity to share some of your perspectives. Thank you. The final question I have, Jonathan, I'm just going to pick up with Jed on one that's dropped in. Actually, I've got quite a number of questions that have come in, which I think are giving us ammunition for some future conversations with more specific experts in the industry. But I want to go to Jed if I can, and Jed, hopefully you can switch on your camera and this will maybe work. Many grassroots golf facilities, the guys in the industry, you know, out there in facilities running them day to day, they don't have massive budgets on these sorts of things. What would you say are some of or one of the simplest things they could do to do a better job of communicating sustainability to their golfers and the customers and indeed their wider communities?
There are, of course, the simple routes to internal communication. Make sure that the reason that it exists and why it's in place is considered, so that the members, the regular customers, the staff understand what's going on and ultimately why it's happening. And then at the grassroots level, obviously the network, the spillover effect of why the great game of golf. We've got one of our campaigns is the power of the game, that seeks to, give ourselves the opportunity to punch 4 or 5 different key aspects of the game. Health and well-being linked to the mental health narrative, the social side, the environmental outdoor side, all of those different components. So, involving at a local level, thinking locally to make sure that you understand who might end up becoming a customer, bring us back to that competitive edge, that commercial agenda that needs to exist within this. So it's not perceived as a hindrance, is easily accessible. So whether it's the bar staff, the F&B, hospitality, the pros, the assistant pros, they understand why that this is an important factor for sustainable practice at any golf club. Now, that might be snag golf, or it might be a golfing session down at a local school. That might be the scorecard that they then have to progress juniors through, but then working with local sports councils and initiatives to provide access to lessons. The PGA are eyes and ears open to these opportunities. The RNA and the home nations, they're there to actually support this all the way through. It's about setting a clear agenda and not doing it for the sake of doing it. And I think that singularity of that vision, that North Star that needs to exist within these facilities, is sometimes what's lacking. And it can fall at the junior organiser's door and it's just an afterthought, or it can fall at a volunteer's door and then it never really gets traction. If it's embedded in the culture of the club, or whatever club, a golf club or just a schools club, whatever it is, it needs to find that traction, and it needs to be able to sort of build those roots. Simple communications is many respects the way to kick that on.
That's a really powerful statement, I think, Jed. I think you've talked about one thing that I'm particularly passionate about. I think we all are, and in particular on this webinar, we're talking to the converted, the people that appreciate it, and that idea of having a North Star, something that we're striving to work towards, a why, a purpose, a vision, however we want to describe it in our industry. I think many of us have it. I think our role is to be able to communicate it to the wider industry. It's a wonderful point they've made. Thank you very much for that. Jonathan, I think with regards to time, we may just skip on to the next section, and I believe you're going to give us a few shared perspectives from yourself.
Well, I've been scribbling furiously as people have been talking, and I was trying to sort of make sense of a few of the key points that came out today. And I might have only captured the things that kind of most impressed or excited me, so I don't proclaim to have everything wrapped up here. But I did think actually that on the Burr Hill side, on the operational side of this, that what Burr Hill talked about in terms of their internal culture, and in particular the teamwork, which Guy and Rob both talked about. Using opportunities to bring people together to put some of these issues in front of them, make them feel good about problem solving together is a really important part. And often, sustainability becomes quite scientific and a bit dry, but it is about people doing real things and wanting to do that. And I think that's a great example. To that point, everything that Jed has just said about communications and wrapping sustainability up as some sort of central part of the purpose of a club or a tournament or an association or golf in a country, and not just leaving it as a sideline issue, is really key. I think there is quite a gap actually in terms of golf's ability at the moment to communicate on sustainability and make it part of the purpose in the way that more and more people around are doing so. And I think that's going to be a big part of golf's journey in the future, is how to talk that talk in a way that's unique to golf actually, and really, really inspiring and compelling for people round about. And that could be locally, nationally, and internationally. And then I thought, just go back to Euron's first presentation about leadership being key. I think, we're seeing more and more examples of that. To Jed's point about COVID, we've actually never been busier with tournaments and associations coming to GEO asking about how can people do a sustainability strategy. So people do seem to be taking maybe the moment in time now, if they've got a chance and a bit of a break from their day-to-day operations, to think about how do we make this part of what we do and make it a thing going forward. But I think there, again, is more ways to do that. The Dutch have been at this a long time, and what can we learn from that so that other countries can accelerate even more quickly? And in fact, even if they don't have those same levels of budget, what can they do, fast, quickly, agile, to get things moving, and actually maybe accrue new sustainability budgets as they go along? That said, we are seeing more federations actually making this a point of investment, because a bit like junior golf or growing the game, it's not just going to happen by itself. It's worthy of investment based on the returns of investment that are increasingly coming back to the industry. And I think the RNA have been, a great lead in that, in terms of research and development, Golf Course 2030, advocacy, and also investing in programs and solutions and showcase examples. And my hope, I guess, going forward is that we can do more of this together. It's an individual need, but we can do it collectively, and we can learn and share and feel good about not just what we do individually, but what we've done and what golf has done against actually some of the most pressing issues that we face and that the next generations will face. So I do hope that community of sustainable golf can become stronger, and people will ask themselves, what can I do and how can I be part of that? And make that part of, inevitably, I think, essentially, what is the future of a great sport. I think we were getting to the point of wrapping up. We're a little bit over time already. So I'd like to thank the guests for spending that time and the extra 10 minutes. Really, really appreciate your insights. This is the first time that we've tried to bring such a range of perspectives together around a common subject. And I hope we've made a decent attempt at making sense of all your really, really valuable inputs and insights. And I hope for the audience, thank you as well. I hope that's also touched on a few different parts of sustainability strategy and what it takes to move this forward. And I hope we fueled a lot of questions and thoughts and room for further discussion. And John, are you back just to sign off now?
I think you've covered all key issues, but the one final thing is, as you've just seen pop up on the screen, a closing link, an opportunity for everyone to go online and download a one-pager summary of what's going on in the industry and a summary of our opinion poll, our international opinion poll. I think you've already said it. My internet connection nearly went a little bit, but in terms of the opportunity to carry on this conversation, I think it's a great opportunity for us all to go online, to join the network amongst our colleagues and peers to continue what we've talked about today. And I think we really look forward to the opportunity to do that in the coming weeks and months as well. Thank you everyone for joining us, and a happy Thank a Greenkeeper Day too as well. Thanks very much.